by for Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors with your host, Drew Kirby.
Hey, this is Luke Holmes.
I am Morgan Wallen.
I'm Riley Green.
I'm Travis Denning.
Hey, I'm Aaron Lewis.
Hey, it's Luke Bryan.
I'm Tim McGraw.
What's up? This is Ian Munsick.
Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin Huntin Outdoors. What we do on this program is, well, we talk all about the outdoors and hooking and hunting, fishing, and even wildlife viewing, Janet, because not everyone likes to go out hunting. They like to go out and enjoy what Wyoming has to offer. And you come on every week, Janet Millick from Wyoming Game and Fish Department to bridge the gap between the hunters and the outdoors folks, along with you guys there at Wyoming Game and Fish Department, so that we're all on the same page.
You know, that's right, Drew. Consumptive users, of course, are a big revenue for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. And a lot of people really enjoy that side of wildlife for, you know, the consumptive use. But there are so many of us that really enjoy the non-consumptive use. And so this is a great thing that we're going to talk today is about sage grouse and viewing sage grouse and how to ethically view them as we're getting ready to kind of go into their mating season. And the lek, you know, that's where these areas where they kind of congregate. So when you're viewing leks, what you can do. And so to do that, we brought in our sage grouse, sagebrush biologist, our expert from Wyoming Game and Fish Department, Nissa Whitford.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm excited to discuss sage grouse with you guys today.
You know, there may be people that have heard a lot about sage grouse, but maybe haven't watched a sage grouse or seen a sage grouse out in the wild. And what would they look for if they're looking at a bird that they're like, what the heck is that? Would that be a sage grouse?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So sage grouse are a chicken-sized bird, and they're the largest grouse species in North America. You know, they really blend into the sagebrush sea. Like, that's their home, and they're kind of those muted tan brown colors. The males in the spring, when they're doing their mating dance, when they're on the lek, they have these white chests and these air sacs, and they kind of puff them up, and they create this popping noise with the air sac, but then they also move their wings across the air sac to create this swishing noise. Females, a little smaller, brown, gray, very muted tones, and the males are very similar, a little bigger, but with those white chests that you can see when they display.
So when they're doing the puffing up and the wing movements, are they basically saying, hey, ladies, come get some?
Definitely. So they are trying so hard to attract the ladies with their special dance. And there's been a lot of research on like what makes the dance so amazing. And the males that are having very clean, crisp movements and doing it the fastest and the like, you know, kind of the loudest, they get the most ladies. On a lek, there'll be a lot of males present, but only a handful of them are getting any action.
Like, what are the numbers on one of the leks?
So Wyoming has a wide range of lek sizes. We have some leks with just a handful of birds, and then in those peak population years, some leks we have close to 300 males on them.
Wow. Now, you've mentioned lek. For those that don't know, can you explain what that is?
Sure. So a lek is kind of this open area in the sagebrush where the birds go to congregate. Sometimes it'll be, you know, it's just an area with like good visibility. They're making a lot of sound and noise, and so they want that to carry. So it's just kind of this clearing in the sagebrush, if you will.
People are going to watch these birds do their thing in the spring. There are multiple places around Wyoming that have this option in the lek. And we'll talk about that in a second, but are those just focused points? Are they other places other than the highlighted leks?
There's about 2,500 known leks in Wyoming, and about 1,700 of those are occupied. But we have, you know, just picked a few and published those on our website. So to kind of congregate that public use, to disturb the least amount of birds, and to make it as easily for those folks to access Wyoming's wildlife and enjoy that unique mating display. So there's directions, and they're a little bit easier to get to from some of our larger, I guess, urban, I hate using the word urban in Wyoming, but our urban areas.
And obviously the reason that Game and Fish picks these leks that they publicize and give directions to is because they're the ones that people can get to and should feel comfortable with. Now, when you're visiting one of these leks, what kind of action is there going to be? Is it all day action, like early morning to late afternoon?
Well, if they show up Saturday afternoon, they miss the action. Sage grouse, early risers, those sage grouse. So you need to arrive at that lek site an hour before sunrise. So get up early, grab your coffee, and then you'll get a good amount of action, lots of birds strutting, and then that peters out couple hours after sunrise. Depends on the weather and whatnot, but they're early morning.
With us still having a little bit of winter sticking around, how does that weather affect the sage grouse being on the leks?
So sometimes, those sage grouse are very determined. Like, mating is what they need to be doing. And so oftentimes they are attending the lek, doing the dance, trying to catch the ladies' attention, even if we cannot get out to the lek to view that. The snow might prohibit them, make them start a week or two later, but they are very timely animals. Like they want to do what they want to do, even if we can't get out there to observe it.
And what time of year are they most? You mentioned once the snow's gone, so are we talking April, May, April through June?
Yeah, so the birds can start lekking, attending those leks as early as mid-March. And they'll go all the way to almost mid-May. The bulk, I would say the best viewing is in later in April, because it's when those yearling males, they usually wait to attend the lek, or they get kind of driven off the lek by the more senior males. So they are present on the lek a little later. So you might see more of a visual display if you go a little later in April and into May.
Where would you find grouse after that time? Are they in the same general areas, or do they just go in hiding?
Well, they don't go in hiding. They spend their whole lives in the sagebrush sea. And so most birds stay within, 4 to 5 miles of the lek location. So the hens nest in those areas. The males hang out in those areas. There's exceptions, but that's the general area that they're in year round.
Nissa, Jen had mentioned about the snow now, but what do grouse do when there is snow on the ground?
Sage grouse usually have great high winter survival. They hang out again in the sagebrush. And so in the winter, they're looking for those more kind of windswept ridges or areas of high sagebrush cover. They eat sagebrush primarily in the winter, so they got to be able to get to it. And they're trying to avoid that really deep snow. Like us, it's really tough to move around in the snow, in that deep snow. And for them, it's tough to move around, tough to get to their food source. But they're out there in the sagebrush, and we all notice like the snow is not very consistent across the landscape, and they're looking for those areas that are a little easier to access the sage.
Will they migrate to those areas?
I don't know that I would use the word migrate, but they will move to those areas. They will search them out.
How active is a sage grouse? Are they more active in the spring and summer when they can actually move around? And is that why they gain more weight during the winter, because they don't move around as much?
They definitely do tend to kind of stay in a fewer spots during the winter. They've seeking out those areas on the landscape with that high sagebrush cover, those kind of windswept ridges. And they don't really deviate too far from that area. Whereas in the spring and the summer, they'll move around a little bit more. The lek activity is very, those males dancing, that takes a lot of energy out of them, especially when you think they're doing it from maybe mid-March to mid-May. It's a lot of time, a lot of energy. In the winter, though, sometimes they'll burrow down into the snow to protect themselves from the wind and, be a little bit warmer. So they'll do that in response to those really heavy snow depths, and they'll just kind of hunker down there. So they're like us in the winter. We don't really get out too much.
We had talked about lek viewing and going out and watching. And when you go out to see the grouse, what should you do? What should you keep in mind and always remember? I mean, obviously, like anything else, you need to respect the creature.
Absolutely. And I can let Nissa handle a lot of this. But first and foremost, I want to say we have an incredible LEC viewing guide on our website. So all of this information that we're about to talk about is laid out really, really well on our website. You can download it, you can read it, you can do whatever you would like, but they're really great reminders because there's things that we don't think about, like turn off your vehicle lights and engine. You know, when you kind of drive up there, sometimes a lot of us get to stay in our car and roll down our windows, and it's a cold morning in April. So we keep that thing idling. And so there's some suggestions on there to turn off your engine and your lights as to not disturb the sage grouse.
Yeah, and make sure you get there at the appropriate time. Show up an hour before sunrise, as I had said earlier, and then stay for the whole show. Enjoy the display the birds are putting on, take in the sights and the sounds. And then after the birds are done, you can leave and go back home. So you'll be sitting in your vehicle for a while with the lights off and the engine off. Also, don't forget to bring your binoculars or your spotting scope. You're not going to be able to pull right up there. You need to keep some distance. You need to give the birds their space. Remember, they don't like a lot of disturbance. So you want to stay far back and use the binoculars or spotting scopes to enjoy them. We kind of covered this, but stay in your vehicle. Just sit there and enjoy the show. Don't make a lot of loud noises or sudden movements. It's a very sound-rich activity, and so they do not need extra noise or disturbance.
Which really points to dogs as well. A lot of us like to haul either our bird dogs or our little lap dogs around with us when we go do some of these things in the out of doors. And in this situation, it's really not okay. Even though we might think that it's okay if they stick in the car with us, we just can't control them, and we don't know, how they'll react. And excessive barking might be viewed as a noise disturbance, like Nissa was talking about.
When you go to one of these designated LECs, are there areas for you to park? Is it along the road? You just stay on the road? What's the best way to
pick where you're going to view the sage grouse?
Yeah, so they're not so much marked areas, but each of those LECs outlined in the viewing guides, some of them have parking instructions, or they'll say like pull off in the clearing here or park at the cattle guard. So they are giving you some cues in those that viewing guide description.
Well, Janet and Nessa, we do appreciate it and very excited about being able to go out and check out these sage grouse in their natural habitat. Thanks again for being on the show. If you have any questions for Game and Fish, hit us up in the radio station's app. We're back with Brian from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
It's Drew and Brian Woodward from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports, a big sponsor of this program, and we do appreciate that. And Brian, the store open, and you're moving some good items. I know that people were in last week checking out a lot of the fishing items. You guys have been stocking up and getting things in order for fishing season.
Yeah, guys are starting to get the itch. They've been cooped up in the houses all winter long, and now we get some nice days of some sunshine and the hope of some ice melting, and guys are jumping in their boats and they're restocking their tackle.
We've been talking over the last couple of weeks about how important it is to make sure that you're ready to go in that scenario. And with what we're having over the next few days, I hope you don't jump the gun too much. You got to make sure that you're still kind of winterized until we can get it out there.
Yeah, the nice part about those of us that like that early spring fishing is most of us are, inside of an outboard motor, right? So we pull it out of the water, drop the motor, it drains. So, we're pretty much good to go. Just make sure you keep all the water out of your pumps and that kind of stuff. But you got to pick our days, we're everybody's itching, and there's a few lakes that are starting to open up.
Now, I do know that Riverbend Shooting Preserve has been pretty active lately. A lot of folks doing some clay shooting, and that's one way to keep up on your game when you're maybe your bird hunter throughout the off season is getting out there and shooting.
Our bird season just ended on Friday. Now we'll start looking at doing some sporting clays and some 5-stand out there. And if you just want to get out there and just brush up, and it's got 3 different courses out there, easy just to get along. You can usually either park and just walk from each station to station, but it's a great way to burn an hour or two just to just keep shooting.
And really, if you're wondering what kind of shotgun that you need for that, whatever you would hunt your birds with, well, that'd work.
We're not getting real serious about this, right? We're just getting out there and trying to break some clay targets. So, yeah, I mean, most of the time I'm using the same shotgun that I bird hunt with.
Now, if someone does want to maybe go off on their property and do some clays, I mean, you guys carry a lot of shooting stuff there as well.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy that just wants to run out to Coal Mountain and shoot a box of clay targets, we've got the clay targets. We've got plenty of trap loads right now. 410 still really tough, but we're starting to get some good inventory on 20 gauge and 12 gauge, and we've got hand throwers. Everything you need just to go out and have a good time.
And of course, with this beautiful weather that we've had on a few days here or there, you got the smokers. You got a good line of smokers too.
Yeah, well, now we're just kind of looking at processing a lot of our game from the winter ones, and maybe we're making our piles of jerky to throw in the boat or to take camping, or maybe you need just a portable Traeger or some type of a grill to take out Alcova when you go out for the weekend. So we've got all those Coleman road trips, all those portable grills and portable Traeger smokers as well.
Now, one thing that I enjoy doing every year is going out camping, and the camping experience is a lot like the fishing experience. You got to make sure that all of your gear is up to date and up to par.
Yeah, I mean, some guys are just, camping out of the back of their vehicle, and then there's others that are pulling big fifth wheels, and they don't have to do a whole lot of prep work, just kind of restock a little bit. But, back in, when I was just starting off camping, I just had a storage tote that kind of had my Coleman stove, my bottles of propane, everything you would need would just fit pretty much in a storage tote, go into the back trunk of your car, and then there you go.
Yeah, my setup is that. I've got my tent, my sleeping bag, and my Rubbermaid tote, and I'm on the road. There's not a whole lot of preparing to go because it's all ready to go. And that's another great thing about Rocky Mountain Discount Sports is if you don't have one of those totes put together, you could come through the camping aisle and just knock that out.
Yeah, pretty easy to do, and water storage, luggable loos for, the portable toilets, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we have really everything you would need to get you going.
Well, come on out and check them out at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports. No matter what you need for the outdoors, hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, even gun storage, lots of great safes and locks. Come on in and see them anytime at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Back with the Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors. Brian from Rocky Mountain Discount Sports is with me. And Brian, I heard a report that up on Alcova, there's still up to 18 inches of ice.
Yeah, well, I also heard a report that there was guys fishing out of boats and guys fishing on the ice.
Yeah, it's kind of a smorgasbord of fishing right now as parts of the lake are open, but most of it are still covered in ice.
Yeah, we just got done with that big flushing flow that through the North Platte. So, they had 10 solid days of running 4,000 cubic feet of water through there. And so if you notice, a lot of people would say yeah, I noticed the water was high in town. And then the next morning it was down again. They're like, well, what's going on here? Well, that's done. So now all that water, that was going through Alcova is kind of helping break some of that ice up. And then that water that's flowing down, that's going to be hitting Glendo here pretty soon. That's gonna make a big difference on getting that opened up as well.
Which that's what the water that's being released was designated for. They just do it at a higher rate so that it gets to Glendo.
Glendo is really there just as a, flood control more than anything and some irrigation, obviously. But they almost always, it's just very, very seasonally what happens is they drop that lake down to about 20% in the fall. And then all winter long, as we get snow and melt off and run off and all that kind of stuff, the lake just generally kind of gradually just goes up and up and up. And, I think it's at somewhere in the mid 40% range right now. But that's why, ice fishermen sometimes will have that problem where last week everything was good. We got a little more runoff. The lake starts filling up. Now the ice starts pulling away from shore, and you hear guys talking about getting on the ice using planks. Well, because as that ice comes up, it pulls further. As the water comes up, the ice pulls away from shore.
Which this is an interesting scenario. So you were at 20% up to 40%,
And when it's at 20%, all those fish are clumped together. And as the water levels go up, they spread out. How will you determine where to fish and how to find them?
You know, it still has a lot to do with forage and water temperature. So even though the water's coming up, you know, those fish are still probably a little bit in a dormant state. Maybe they're going to start feeding a little bit more than they have been, but they're still very relevant to what the forage base is. So if those shad are sitting down there in 60 foot of water, that's probably where those fish are gonna continue to be. As the water temperature rises and it gets a little bit warmer, now the shad move into some, you know, different thermoclines, different water depths, and eventually those shad are going to find shallow water so they can spawn. It's really just kind of, again, watching graphs and just watching water temperatures and seeing what those fish are doing.
We're kind of at this area of the year that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks because everybody wants it to be boat fishing time, but ice is still on, and safety on that ice is very big importance. But after this flushing flow has pushed the water through, I mean, it's made a big difference in the clarity of the water and all the stuff in North Platte. The difference is greatly noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, the river looks fantastic right now. Of course, we've had cold weather, and so we haven't had the runoff. So all of the creeks and all those small tributaries that normally dump into the river are still froze, and we're not seeing that runoff. But once we start seeing that runoff, especially on the river where those creeks are running in, it's going to start getting real muddy. And so getting up above and ahead of that mud line is going to be important. The mud line and the mud down at Glendo and some of the reservoirs, the muddy water tends to warm up faster. It's darker, it's deep, it's just holds the heat from the sun in there a little bit better. So the muddy water will tend to warm up a little bit quicker, and that will affect the fish too. You know, a lot of times that mud, especially on a reservoir system, is only in the top surface column, like maybe the first 3 to 5 feet. Sometimes you can see it with a graph. Don't be afraid to fish the mud. I mean, the fish, you know, a lot of times will get there for protection, especially those walleyes that don't like that bright sunshine. And a lot of times that water is a little bit warmer.
So it's been forecasted that we could experience some very heavy flooding this year. How will that affect the fishing, especially on the river? Does that really affect anything other than the fact you may have a problem wading in it?
You know, the fish just react differently. You know, sometimes, you know, the fly fishermen are fishing a seam like towards the center of the river, looking for oxygenated water. If that water's higher, now maybe you've got maybe the fish will move to the banks a little bit. It can affect a few different things. Same thing in the reservoir system, you know, typically we've talked in the past, you know, when the water's rising, we fish shallow. And so, but that also has to do with water temperature and clarity as well. So just because the water's coming up, if the water's only 40 degrees, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean the fish are going to be there feeding. They might still be in a little bit deeper water chasing those shad or whatever bait fish they're after. So every year, you know, sometimes the history repeats itself and you get the same bite every year. But yeah, we've got a lot of water on the mountains right now. And if we get a lot of warm weather days in a row, it's gonna make a mess of things.
It sure is. And they're talking, I think 2011 was the last time that they predicted the kind of flooding that they're thinking, because we're all excited that there's actual snow melt that's going to happen. It's really a good time, Brian, for you guys at the North Platte Walleyes Unlimited. Your banquet's coming up, and you got a lot of things going on this year. And you've also got the Wyoming Walleye Stampede coming.
Yeah, you know, the walleye banquet's coming up on April 15th, and we were officially sold out.
Wow,
so
that's awesome.
There's 350 seats taken at that event out at the hangar. If you missed out this year, don't be afraid to get a hold of us early next year, because that is one of the, probably, in my opinion, one of the best events in town. All the money stays in town, and it's all you can eat walleye.
You can't go wrong. It was good last year, that's for sure. But also one of the things you guys do is you help kids and families get into fishing at a younger age.
Yeah, North Platte Walleyes has been around for just about 25, maybe just a little over 25 years. It's kind of a sleeper club, I mean, it does a lot of great things, but you have probably seen their fishing poles or their life jackets, or you've probably seen something that they've actually done in the community, life jacket loaner programs. So all these Murad Park, where you see the stands that has the life jackets there. Right. The North Platte Walleyes originally worked with the fire department to set those stands up and to actually supply the life jackets for those. And that's all through the North Platte system. You'll see them down at Glendale. You'll see them at Pathfinder. So that was one of the big things. They've started a scholarship program up at Casper College for anybody that's going into the biology fields. So hoping to get some wildlife biologists out of that program. If you do have an organization or you have an event that you think you want to help supply some fishing poles, give us a call. You can contact us through the website at North Platte Walleyes Unlimited.
Doing lots of good things for kids, families, and other organizations. Now, Brian, you're still taking entries for the Wyoming Walleye Stampede, which I believe kicks off in May.
Yeah, our first event is May 13th and 14th at Glendale Reservoir. Entries are looking good, so we're going to have another good full field of anglers on that event. And if it fishes anything close to last year, it's going to be another exciting year in terms of quality of fish and a guy can go out and just, be successful catching fish.
Well, if you have any questions about fishing or the outdoors, stop in and see them at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
It's Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors. Good morning. I am Drew. Thank you so much for tuning in. And a few years ago, I got an opportunity to know a fella that, he's really appealing to the outdoor man. His name's Steve Conover. Steve has been doing music for quite some time now, and when you have a name like Hardcore Hunting Music, Steve, you're right up our alley.
That's a good thing.
Steve, I want to go back from the beginning with you. You've got a really good story. You've been doing the music thing for quite a while, but kind of give us a background of your story.
In the mid-'90s, I owned a country western bar just outside of Washington, D.C., Camp Springs, Maryland, where Andrews Air Force Base is, called Cotton Eye Joe's Saloon. And we closed it down. I had just gotten married, and my wife was from Louisiana, and I had been making the trips to Nashville and trying to do the Nashville thing, trying to get a songwriter thing going. And I never really had the ambition to ride around on a bus for 8 months out of the year and sing live. I enjoy singing live, but that wasn't my thing. It was songwriting. And I never could really get anything going. Kind of gave up on that, and we decided to move back to where she was from in West Monroe, Louisiana. Just kind of start over and enjoy that lifestyle, hunting, fishing. It's Sportsman's Paradise is the logo for the state. Moved down there, and I wasn't really a spiritual guy or a religious guy of any sort, but I was kind of seeking, some meaning in life, so to speak. And I got invited to go on a catfishing adventure one night with a bunch of guys. It was a bunch of guys with really big beards.
Yeah. So before you go on, let's kind of do a little addition and subtraction on this. Yeah. So you're in West Monroe, Louisiana. You're going on a catfishing adventure with bearded men from West Monroe, Louisiana.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to know where we're going already. And I wasn't really big time into hunting and fishing, more fishing than hunting at that point in my life. And they had become, a couple of them were kind of famous in a very small arena. We'll get to that shortly. But I wouldn't have known them from Adam. I was more petrified about getting in these little John boats running down a river in the night, with all these big guys that looked like they wanted to eat me, basically. And but I was assured that these were all really good guys, and it didn't take me long to figure out that was the truth. They were all amazing people, and that night literally changed the course and direction of my life. We got set up on a riverbank, and the fish weren't biting, and it was January 23rd, 1997. I will never forget it. In North Louisiana in January, it's either 80 or 20. Yeah. And this night it was kind of warm. It was probably in the 40s or 50s. Fish weren't biting. It was a beautiful night. And one of the guys came down and sat next to me and asked me a question just kind of rocked my world. He just sat down and said, "Your name's Conover, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm Jace." He said, "Let me ask you a question." He goes, "Do you know what happens when you die?" And I said, "Nope." He said, "Do you ever think about it?" And I said, "Nope." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because it's not fun to think about." That conversation took flight and lasted pretty much all night long. As the sun was coming up, I was in the river with Jace Robertson, and he was baptizing me.
Wow.
It was just one of those, like we said earlier, one of those places in life where there's a God, and he reaches down and lets you know it. That was a defining and a transitional moment for me. But what ended up happening was I was still kind of allergic to the church building, still kind of am. Uh, and and Jay said, "Well, we do house church on Sunday night. I do one at my house, but it's a younger crowd. I mean, I was, 32 at the time, and he was much younger than that." He said, "But you might like my dad's a little bit better." He gave me the number and directions how to get down to Phil and Kay's house on the river. Wound up down there, still had no clue who Phil Robertson was. I mean, he was still, at that point in 97, he was, the duck commander. He was working on Duckman 3. It was a VHS tape back then. They didn't have DVDs yet. What kind of happened, because we got to talking, and if you know Phil, he's a really curious man, very loving, but very blunt and curious.
Yeah, he doesn't hold any punches when he's talking to you.
No, and so he started asking me about, I owned a bar. He came out of that scene. He knows exactly where I had been and what I had been doing for quite a long time, and talked about songwriting and everything. And then I guess it was probably about the third or fourth house church. I hadn't been to the church building yet. I got down there a little bit early, and me and Phil and Uncle Si, a guy named Dane, they call him Burley, we're sitting down there drinking coffee about an hour before house church started. He said, "Conover," he calls me Conover. He calls me by my last name. He calls everybody by my last name. He said, "Conover, we're putting together," and Gary Stevenson was the guy that did his videography and stuff back then. And he said, "Stevenson's putting together our next Duckman video." He goes, "We have to buy this music from Nashville." He goes, "I think it sounds like porn music. It's not very good." He said, "You're a songwriter. Can you write us some original stuff about duck hunting?" And I'm like, "I guess. I don't know anything about duck hunting." He said, "Well, we can fix that." So they took me on a wood duck hunt, and then it was a Sunday morning hunt towards the end of the season there. I was sitting in a duck blind. The sun was just starting to come up in the swamp, and you could hear everything. And we were drinking coffee, and Phil always prays before shooting hours, and he had just prayed. And while he was praying, I was in the flow state. That state like when you're on a road trip and you've driven for 200 miles and somebody honks a horn and you wake up like, holy crap.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where have I been?
Yeah.
That's the place that I write music from, and I was there. Took a sip of coffee, and I looked up across that swamp and that sunrise, and I said, "Phil, I just wrote the first song." And he said, "Just now?" I said, "Yeah, just the whole thing is there." And he just shook his head, and he said, "Conover, you are one weird cat." And it started from there, and over the next few weeks, I pretty much wrote a CD worth of music. It was a cassette tape at first. That's how long ago it was. It was 8 songs on a cassette tape, and then over the next probably year, I wrote more, and we ended up doing a CD. But "The Life of a Duck Man" was that song I wrote in the blind, and a song called "Duck Doctor." Both ended up on Duckman 3, and it just kind of went from there. And I shared recently, and you saw that a song off that project called "Cut 'Em All Jack" is by far my most streamed song. Has been streamed by over 2 million people in over 70 countries. And if you had told me that right then, I would have laughed you out of that duck blind.
Does the appeal of the Robertson clan, as people have watched the show and they kind of put 2 and 2 together, and maybe see that relationship.
What's cool about that relationship and what I love about Phil and what he does in production work is he's not an overt seller of things. Like if you watch any of the Duckmen DVDs, he doesn't outright sell anything, but he uses product and they produce it in a way where you can see the product they use, but they don't sell anything ever. And I think because of that, because they use my music, it kind of is even strengthens it. The way it all went down, I was literally baptized into their life before I started writing the music. So then the music just embodied that whole scene. And it took a life of its own. So if you listen to The Life of a Duck Band or Cut 'Em All Jack or even some of the funnier songs like 30-Pound Duck, which was inspired by Cy fibbing about the size of animals he's killed, and even fictitious animals like the famous Black Panther that he supposedly sees all the time. That's inspired by that. So there's some funny aspects of it. There's a deeply spiritual aspect to all of my music. And then there's this edgy, hardcore, this is what life is about. It's like all the people that tell you I get closer to God when I go hunting and fishing than I ever do sitting in a church building. That's what our music's about, and that's what Phil's life is about. It's about communing and fellowshipping with God right there in the great outdoors.
How many songs you have? Somewhere over 30 songs now, all stemming from just a few nights there in West Monroe.
But yeah, most of the hunting and fishing music really came out of that first year, basically at Phil's feet every Sunday night, taking it all in. And that's where it all comes from.
Hardcore Hunting Music on Facebook is where you can go. SteveConovermusic.com. Over 2 million streams on Cut 'Em All Jack. So what we're going to do, Steve, is we're gonna play Cut 'Em All Jack here so people can get it. And obviously, can go and buy any of the music that you have available and add to those 2 million streams.
It's on every platform out there, so have all you can eat. If you're on Spotify for free, get it all for free.
Awesome. Very good. Steve Conover, man. Appreciate you coming on and always love hearing your story. It's inspirational and the end result, I think, really got you to where you want to be, right?
Absolutely. And great for having me on to share. I love doing it.
Very good. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. All right, guys. This song is called Cut 'Em All Jack, written with the Robertson family duck hunting in West Monroe, Louisiana. It's on Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.
Cut 'em all, Jack, cut 'em all, Jack. Cut 'em all, Jack, cut 'em all, Jack. Cut 'em all, Jack, cut 'em all, boys, cut 'em all. Cut 'em all, Jack, cut 'em all, Jack. Cut 'em all, Jack, cut 'em all, Jack. Cut 'em all, Jack, cut 'em all, boys, cut 'em all. Lock and loaded, company coming, decoys buzzing, barrels smoking, and doing their thing. Now we'll do ours. Hold your hat, boys, they're in the decoys. Hold that dog still, we don't need noise. I'll tell you what, there's nothing like a good ground squat. Cut 'em all, Jack, cut 'em all, Jack. chicks get their fix. What chicks in? Don't check out. Cut 'em all, Jack. 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 Cut 'em all, boys. Cut 'em all. Cut 'em all, Jack. 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 Cut 'em all, boys. Cut 'em all. Cut 'em all, Jack. 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 Cut 'em all, boys. Cut 'em all. Cut 'em all, Jack. 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 Cut 'em all, boys. Cut 'em all. That's what I mean. Cut 'em all, Jack.
It's Cut 'em All Jack from Steve Conover, good friend of mine, wrote those songs for the Robertsons and some of their earlier DVDs before they became the Duck Dynasty. Thanks so much for tuning in this week. If you want to find out more about Steve, you can hit him up online, steveconovermusic.com, or like his Facebook page, Hardcore Hunting Music. Thanks again for tuning in to Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors, presented by Rocky Mountain Discount Sports and the Brooks Company. We're back next week with another great episode.
Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors with Drew Kirby. If you have a question, want to make a comment, or have an idea for a show topic, message us on the My Country mobile app. Wyoming Hookin and Huntin Outdoors.